Welcome on in, football fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our Week 8 main slate DFS and prop preview out there for tomorrow's main slate. Gonna break down how to approach some of your GPP lineups out there with our top 3 stacks out there for large field contests. It'll give you a little bit of differentiation out there with your correlation and a few game environments that I think are well worth a few looks at to go out there, potentially get to for some leverage. And then afterwards, we're gonna go through the prop side of things, Underdog and Prize Picks, a few pieces of prop exposure that have already gone out there and mixed in you might want to consider getting to yourself. So a lot to go through here. Let's not waste any time at all. It started off with, first off, a look at the Draftkings side and our top 3 stacks of the week. We've got my Patreon projections up on the screen right here. And the first game we're going to go through is going to be Kirk Cousins and the Falcons going into divisional matchup against the Buccaneers. And the Buccaneers defense, though it has been pretty stout this season, has not been that good against opposing quarterbacks, where they rank bottom 5 in fantasy points allowed per game. And given that Kirk Cousins has been pretty surprising this year himself, going out there with Drake London, a lot of targets out there in Atlanta, and has been pretty efficient to this portion of the year. So it's a relatively close game. These close divisional matchups are usually ones that we want to look at to begin with, and especially when it's one that favors a matchup for this quarterback. And while you might expect an offense with such a good matchup to get a little bit of steam with ownership, that's not necessarily what we're getting. You can see over here, he's the highest owned of the 3 quarterbacks that we're going to go through, but still sub 5% at 3.5% projected ownership in my projections. So I know it's right on there, but that's because a lot of the rest of the sheet is censored. Of course, for all the projections, everything that is blacked out on here, completely uncensored. Make sure to check out the Patreon page for that version, but 3.5% is very reasonable in what is one of the higher game totals of the entire week, a solid matchup, and a ton of stacking options that you can get to. So Drake London, Darnell Mooney, both getting some ownership out there at wide receiver, but far from mega chalky at that position. You can go Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson out there at running back. You have plenty of guys you could go to for some correlation. I'd probably have at least one of those guys in every single lineup, but I don't know if I'd be forcing it out there to a double stack. And then with your buybacks, you've got Bucky Irving if he plays. He is expected to play, but you'll want to keep an eye on that one. You've also got Cade Otton, who is extremely popular, but a high points per dollar value that you could use as a buyback, or a Sterling Shepard, Trey Palmer, Jalen McMillan over there at the wide receiver position. I don't know if you have to have a buyback. That's why I have it down here as sometimes, but you've got a lot of options to choose from. So whether you're going with the quarterback who will be a sub 5%, you've got a lot of leverage options out there in terms of your correlation options too. A really attractive option in team stack that I'll be using out there in my lineups. Next up, we got Tua Tagovailoa, obviously leader of the Dolphins offense, coming back for the first time since his devastating concussion. And while he might be a little bit limited, might not be 100% his first time back, he's getting an ideal matchup against this Cardinals defense. And just like I said that the Buccaneers were a little bit disappointing against opposing quarterbacks, you've also got a bottom 5 defense against opposing quarterbacks out there with this Cardinals defense. So one that could be a little bit of a get right spot out there for Tua, but also some of his pass catchers like a Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle. So the projection is still a little bit modest. It didn't go too crazy out there his first week back, but I've got him at sub 5% ownership there, just 3.3%. And whether it's a Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Jonnu Smith, even if you go Achane out there at running back, all of the options that you can pair with them are also relatively low owned. So I like the fact that you can use this for a little bit of leverage. And just like the Kirk Cousins one, when you get the matchup going for you, low ownership, and a game total that is pretty respectable out there in this matchup, you can see why I'd want to get to these kind of quarterbacks. So in terms of buybacks, I've also got it down as a sometimes. I'd say I'd be a little bit more willing to double stack Tua, as he's the kind of quarterback that oftentimes will bring at least one player along with him, if not 2, hence the double stack. In terms of a buyback, I do like that Cardinals offense, specifically guys like a Marvin Harrison, James Conner, also Trey McBride as a buyback. So I like the idea of taking one of those 3 kind of players, but I don't know if I'm going to be forcing it in, like with the role in my optimizer. So I'll be boosting the projection of those sort of players when I'm using a Tua-led lineup, but not necessarily forcing it in with a lineup role. And then the last stack that we're going to go through here is going to be way down towards the bottom end of the board. It's going to save you some salary along with a little bit of leverage, and that would be Jameis Winston at $5,200. For as much as the Ravens defense can talk about having one of the better units in the NFL, they've been atrocious against opposing quarterbacks. They rank bottom 5 in the NFL against opposing quarterbacks in terms of fantasy points allowed per game. And Jameis Winston, though it's his first start of the year, he's a really good fantasy quarterback. He likes to throw the ball down the field. He's a little bit careless with the ball sometimes, but there's one thing that he won't do is sit back there and not try, right? He's going to go down there, try and make some big plays happen. He's usually an absolute machine when it comes to touchdowns, and especially garbage time touchdowns, as usually he's playing from behind because of the kind of mistakes he makes with the football. So it's $5,200. It's an attractive matchup against this Ravens defense, and you've also got some good buybacks on the other side of that game. So Derrick Henry being the most obvious buyback option, but an Isaiah Likely, Zay Flowers, even a Mark Andrews, who's looked a lot more involved in the offense the last few weeks. And then in terms of your actual stacking options, they're all relatively low owned as well. So you could go with Njoku. He'd be my favorite option in terms of some correlation. Jerry Jeudy. You also got Elijah Moore. Nick Chubb, if you want to go with a running back out there as well, are all options that you can use. And because you're taking a $5,200 quarterback, they're going to have the salary to take you whoever the heck you want. So if you want Derrick Henry as a buyback, you're going to have the extra salary because you're punting down there at quarterback. If you want to take some of the more premier players like a Njoku or a Nick Chubb at the running back position, you're going to have the flexibility to get that done. So you love the ownership. You like that he's nearly sub 2%, but all surprisingly good matchups for these quarterbacks, and you're getting solid leverage, right? Low ownership in every single case, in all respectable game environments as well. Now for the prop side of things, where I've got 4 props I've already entered you might want to consider getting to yourself. So first off, over here on Prize Picks, where the first prop we're going to go through is an over on A.J. Brown receptions, who's at 5.5 over there on Prize Picks. And the reasoning for this is first off some of the sportsbook odds, which are in that -130 to -140 range on a variety of different books. I think one book has them at about even money, but most of them definitely leaning towards that over. So when you've got that plus EV value in the back pocket, that's always something that's nice to have, but also a matchup against the Bengals, which should be relatively close. You got a close spread, relatively high total between these two competent offenses. And the one thing that's great is that A.J. Brown is going to be a lot healthier this week as he does not have an injury designation, something that he couldn't say for the last month or so as he was recovering back from injury. So though the game logs, if you're a game log watcher, have not been what you expect from an A.J. Brown recently, there's a reason for that with him recovering from that injury. And then also you get a lot better matchup here against that Bengals defense. So the over is plus EV compared to a lot of those sports books out there. And again, I think it's a decent game environment as well. On the flip side of that game, you've got an under on Jerry Jeudy receptions, who on sportbooks is also in that -130 to -135 range out there for his under. So another quote unquote plus EV lean that you could go out there and mix in. And though I do think that game in general is a pretty decent game environment, he has got a lot of other guys around him to go out there and feed. You've got Cedric Tillman, you've got all these other guys like Elijah Moore on there, David Njoku, who's got a 5.5 reception line himself. And while I do think that Jameis Winston can be productive on that offense, it's just that you've got to get Jerry Jeudy over 4 receptions, and you can see lately he hasn't had very much success in getting to that kind of number. So Amari Cooper being out of there is going to open up the offense quite a bit, but you have a few other guys like Cedric Tillman and Elijah Moore who are going to eat up a lot of that usage as well. So I'm taking the under there at 3.5 receptions, which gives us a plus EV lean in both cases and pretty solid value out there with that 3x payout. And then now over here on the underdog side, where I've got 2 props I've taken here as well. So first off would be this Tyreek Hill over on receiving yards. He's at 82.5. And I've already talked about how I think that offense in general has got a solid matchup against the Cardinals. But Tyreek Hill is also going to benefit from that, not just Tua at quarterback. You've got a bottom 5 defense in terms of allowing yards to the wide receiver position. And then an offense that's going to be opened up with Tua at the quarterback position as well. So he's at 82.5. It's not not necessarily massive line value out there compared to books, but from the traditional analysis perspective, we're expecting a little bit of a bounce back out there from Tyreek Hill, which is why I'm taking his over at this number. And then I also took this over on Jonathan Taylor rushing yards at 65.5. He's at 66.5 on a few books, so I guess a little bit of line value if you want to be technical about it. But just like this Tyreek Hill prop, this is a get right spot for somebody that's hasn't been in the lineup the last few weeks. So I think that's why it's all the way down here at 65.5. A very soft projection for what we're used to seeing with Jonathan Taylor, who's routinely closer to 70, even 80 rushing yards depending on matchup. And while the Houston Texans defense isn't necessarily a soft matchup, they're also not an elite unit against opposing running backs. So Jonathan Taylor might not have his full usage rate, but he's still at a 16.5 carry prop on most of the different sports books out there, and I project him for 4.5-5 yards per carry with his elite efficiency out there on the ground. That puts him well over the 65.5 mark. So I think it's a soft projection. It's at least 5 to 7 yards too low. Same thing with the Tyreek Hill prop. When he's healthy, he's in that 90 to even close to 100 yard range out there for projection. And you've got Tua back, so I don't have those concerns out there with either player. And Jonathan Taylor, right? He had that questionable tag taken off early on Friday. I don't have that concern about his usage rate this week. So 2 overs that are like, same thing over there in Prize Picks. Those are 2 props that I already went out there and mixed in for all the different exposure, all different slips that I'm taking out there for tomorrow's main slate. We got a few on here, but for all of the other ones that I'm taking, there'll be plenty out there before lock, and a few that I've already taken, which I've already bumped. So I couldn't give you guys those props, or else I would over here on the piece of content. For all of that before any line movement, make sure to check out the Patreon page. As I said before, link in the description of the video to go out there and join that. So I'm posting all the slips, all the different reasonings for why I'm getting to certain prop slips, certain pieces of exposure, to not only give you some insight into what I'm betting, let you go out there and tail it if you'd like, but also to make you a better of the NFL, give you insight into what to be looking for out there in props, the kind of ways that you can generate value and find props that'll give you profit long term. So I'm teaching you the process and giving you some insight and some props you can mix in along the way. So make sure to check that out if you guys were wondering how to find all the content that I'm getting to. And again, link in the description of the video for that. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the Week 8 main slate. Before you hopping out of here, go ahead, smash that like button for me, and also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. That'll include, of course, our Monday Night Football breakdown, Thursday Night Football next week, as well as the rest of the schedule, and all the different pieces of golf content I'm doing there too. So you won't want to miss any of that. Make sure you subscribe so you get notified when content is going up. And also, best of luck with all of your exposure out there tomorrow, and check out the Patreon page for all the behind the scenes content as I mentioned before. That's where you can get the spreadsheets that have all of my DFS projections on them, as well as where you can get all the different pieces of prop content I'm entering as well. So make sure to check it out. Link in the description of the video for that. But also, if you want a chance to earn a free month of that Patreon page, go ahead and comment down below who you've got as the top scorer for the main slate. If you get the top score, you will win a free month, and it'll be first come, first serve. So once a player's taken once, they cannot be taken again, and no restrictions on that. Could be anyone on the slate. Go ahead, give me whoever the top scorer is, and if you're right, you will get a free month access to that. So if you want to try it out, see what it's all about, go ahead, give me your best guess down below. And if you just want to join, don't want to have to win a giveaway to go out there and get the goods for tomorrow, then go ahead and just join it in the link. So that's all I've got, guys. I appreciate your support here on the channel as per usual. Best of luck out there with everything you're going with, and let's have ourselves a slate.